And a very, very good morning to you. Welcome to today's edition of Breaking Bread. We are actually live at Jacob's Restaurant, 7152 Ogontz Avenue. I'm Tiffany Bacon. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a very special broadcast today. It's our first live broadcast that's not at an already established event. Today we're going to have our Brunch and Groove event right after the broadcast. So if you want to come on down and do a two-step with our very own DJ G-Flow, please come and join us. We're going to party and enjoy ourselves, but we're also enjoying the food at Jacob's. They're doing their brunch buffet right now, so if you want to join us, you can enjoy the brunch buffet until 3 o'clock as well. Just come on down and see us, 7152 Ogontz Avenue. So it is my distinct pleasure to welcome my special guests for Breaking Bread today. We are breaking bread with members of the African American Genealogy Group. We have Adrian Wally, we have Dean Henry, and Regina Vaughn. Welcome you all so much to the program. How are you today? Deliciously satisfied. Yes, before we get into the genealogy conversation, we just ate our brunch, so I'm sorry you don't get to see the food right now because we gobbled it up. We had a variety of things on the plate. Let's talk about what you ate today for brunch, Adrian.
All right, well, I had fried catfish and grits. So good.
So yeah. That's a great Sunday brunch option. Anytime you get brunch, as long as you have a little catfish and some grits, you're good to go. Yes. How about you, Dean?
It wasn't standard pancakes and sauces. We were in a hurry, so we wanted to get something fast that was good. It was fast, it was good.
I love it. All right, and for you, Miss Regina.
I had the vegetables.
Oh, we're gonna need you to put your mic down so we can hear you clearly. There we go.
I had the vegetarian omelet.
Okay.
Delicious.
Yes. So that's
mushrooms.
Ooh.
It was delicious.
Okay, so if you are on the vegetarian side of things, or vegan, or pescatarian, so I'm kind of pescatarian vegan. So I had the home fried potatoes, and they had mussels, and they had catfish. So you can get down with any of those. If that is your dietary option, you have options here at Jacob's today. So we'd love for you to come through and have brunch with us. So I've been wanting to have this conversation about genealogy for a very long time. If you've ever watched Henry Louis Gates' Finding Your Roots, then you understand he's able to really dig deep into a lot of celebrities' lives and really go back into their lineage. The average person may or may not be able to get that far. So I wanted us to have just an opening conversation about, one, how did you all get into genealogy? What was the motivation? And how has the process been for you thus far? And I'll start with Adrian because we've been lightly talking about this for a couple of years.
Yeah, because we've known each other for a little while.
Exactly.
So we've been these chats.
Exactly.
So I will give you two kinds of answers to this. So the first part is neither of my parents were born or raised in Philadelphia.
Okay.
So I did not grow up surrounded by extended family. I got to spend time with cousins, aunts and uncles, grandparents, but I wasn't raised sitting in anybody's knee. So I think that I always just had a gentle desire to know more about my people and where we came from. Yeah. But when I was in high school, we did two projects, I think in my senior year. One of them was we went out to the historic Woodland Cemetery out at 40th and Woodland where the trolleys come out of the ground.
Yes.
And we had to choose a headstone and research the person's life throughout the different repositories all around Philadelphia. So the Balch Institute, the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia History Museum, all those places. And around the same time, we were also reading Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, where the main character, I'm going to spoil it for some of you if you haven't read it, but still read it because it's a great book. The main character hears kids singing this song while they're playing jumping rope and all sorts of things. And he realizes that the song they're singing is telling the story of his family. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, I'm watching this fictional character discover his family story. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I'm learning how to actually do historical research into a person's life and their family's life. And I was hooked. And now I've been doing this research for over 20 years.
That's amazing. That is amazing. I'd love to hear your entry story, Dean.
So I think a lot of us saw Roots when it first came on TV. That sparked our interest, but I never thought that I could really research my family that far back in the 70s. But in the late 80s, my sister-in-law was having a family reunion, and my side of the family rarely, if ever, got together. And being the computer nerd of the family, she asked if I could take her 3x5 cards that showed the names of family members and their parents and put it on the computer, which I did for her. And the light bulb went on. Well, my brother's, married to her, so I can actually put him in and do our family. And that's when I got hooked, just putting all the names and the relationships together. And I went from not knowing anyone in the room from family gatherings to being the one everybody would ask, now, how's that person my second cousin 3 times removed? Or how does that work? So it really became an obsession with me through the technology end of it.
Okay, I love it. And Miss Regina, how about you?
Again, with a family reunion and a Roots series, my late mother started the family research. So in the 80s, and she was trained, and during the 80s, she traveled the country to interview the elders. They were in their 80s at that time.
Wow.
And they remembered their enslaved grandfather. So fast forward, I ignored my mother for 30 years. But in 2010, with DNA, I went to Cameroon, and I stood on the banks of the Atlantic, and I had an out-of-body experience. So I came home, and I started genealogy, continuing Mom's work. This is her book. She published it. Sankofa, go back and fetch it to inform the future.
Yes.
And so that's my project, ongoing project, to update it. And so the research has been fascinating to be able to do that and encourage others to do it as well. Because with DNA, we are able to find our lost family.
And what's beautiful, some of us knew Regina's mom, and she was a member of the African American genealogy group along with the rest of us. And so to get to see her be so passionate about that research, and then to get to see Regina carrying it on so passionately is a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Thank you, Adrian.
I love it. And you mentioned some very key things. The series Roots got a lot of folks, especially if you were alive at that time and old enough to remember watching it. I was six years old at the time, and it was a family affair to sit around ABC each night for what was it, a week and a half, 2 weeks that it aired. The whole family watched it together, and I was initially interested, like, what ship did we come on, and who was the first person in our family that was here, and so on and so forth. But nobody in my family really had an interest in digging back that far, which was interesting. Even now, the elders who are left don't have that much interest in digging that far back. It's my generation, Gen X, and so on, that are like, no, I want to know. I want to learn these things. And unfortunately, for those elders who passed on before we got the idea to do the research, there's a lot of information that's lost. So what's your recommendation for people who are like, I don't have an elder alive to go to for a lot of this information? I'm literally starting fresh. What's the first thing you should do?
Well, start with yourself. There's a chart called a pedigree chart, where you put yourself down and put down your parents' names and then their parents, and just start going back. The U.S. Federal Census is a good way to look at information from the past if you're starting from scratch. The most recent one is the 1950 census, and they're taken every 10 years. And I was actually able to trace some of my branches back to the very first census that was taken back in 1790. I had no idea when I started this work that we could actually do that kind of work. And another thing, if you don't really know where to start, the African American Genealogy Group is an excellent place to start. You can join us. It's aagg.org. We actually have a mentoring program where we mentor people so they can get started. And I'd also give a shout out to the LDS Church, the Mormons. They have history centers where they have free volunteers that will help you get started with your research.
I love it.
And I would encourage you to go back to those elders one day when you're not busy and just go and sit with the most agreeable one. See if you can get them to talk. Kind of push them along. Well, we want the next generation to know. See if you can encourage them. And then on the other hand, even though some had passed on, Mom did these interviews in the 80s, but I did them because then you have, like in my father's family, I have a baby brother where there's a gap. And I said, well, how come you know so much? Well, my older brothers, they were home, but they had to take me, so I'm sitting in the car, and I'm listening to mom and dad talk.
Mm-hmm.
And then another family member, she was what they call the lap baby. So she was actually sitting in her grandmother's lap, and she had amazing memory as well.
Mm.
So you think about who maybe your mother,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you have somebody that you and in our Black culture, we're very close to our friends and neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they know that.
Mm-hmm.
So go to those elders and kind of get them in the morning when they're in a good mood and try to encourage them. They all can't be that closed mouth.
If I could interject, it doesn't have to be your direct family line either.
Yes.
I went to a family reunion and heard this woman at the end of the table. I had no idea how I was related to the people in the room talking about Aunt Lucille. And I said, "Are you talking about Lucille Milton Henry?" She said, "That's my aunt." I'm like, "That's my grandmother." We went back to her house in Bainbridge, and I wanted to see what she had, what records, and all of it were personal records. I said, "I really am interested about stuff about family." And she couldn't think of anything. And I looked on the wall. She had this picture on the wall. And she said, "Oh, that's my aunt Phyllis and my grandmother Cassie. That's my second great grandmother and my third great grandmother who was born enslaved."
Wow.
And I was able to trace back to her father, actually, through my research. So
That
just
is amazing.
asking when you go to family gatherings.
Yeah. And so for myself, a lot of those elders have passed on. So I don't have them to talk to about some things. I was able to talk to my grandmother before she passed, and my Nana, but my Nana passed when I was in college. So I didn't get as much information. But one thing that came up a lot, because I did sign up for one of the DNA sites. I'll leave them out of the conversation for right now. One of the online places where you can trace your lineage. And there was a story that was passed down for years and years and years. But according to the census, that story wasn't exactly on point. So how do you, as someone who's interested, who said, "Oh, I always knew Uncle so-and-so was such and such," and if you look at the census records or other official records, you find out that's not true. What is your best advice for navigating that, number one, and then sharing that with your surviving family members to say, "You know that story you told about such and such? This document said that's not true. What's going on?" Adrian,
Honestly,
what's going on?
Honestly, what I would say is collect as many sources as you can, collect as many primary sources as you can. And so when I say primary sources, what I'm talking about is things that were created at the moment that the event took place or as close afterwards as possible. So think about vital records, think about birth records, think about marriage and divorce, think about death records, and think about all of the many types of documents that could have been created around one single event. So think about when a person passes away. There's a death certificate, there's an obituary, there's an application for a headstone, there's all of the work that needs to take place with the funeral director and all of that. Like there's many different documents. Who are the people providing that information? How did they get the information? Can you trust that? And so finding all of the many sources for every stage of a person's life. Look at education records, look at military records, because they're all going to have bits and pieces of the story that you're trying to have unfold in front of you.
Yeah.
And when it gets down to it, you can just tell people nothing is ever perfect, but the preponderance of evidence is suggesting A and not B. And it's okay, because sometimes stories change because we have new information. We just have to remember sometimes people are holding on to stories because they have a specific emotional attachment to them. And so we just have to understand like why they might not want that story to change.
There's a secret there. And so you find out sometimes in a lot of cases, someone may have been raised as you may be raised as knowing this person here is your mother. You find out later that was your grandmother.
Right.
And it was perhaps the person that you were told was your sister is actually your mother. And that has happened a lot. We've seen that happen even to celebrities, whether it was uncovered on a Henry Louis Gates show or some other way it was uncovered.
So to your point, you have to be prepared that you might find out something that's upsetting to you initially, but you know, it's fact. To Adrian's point, it's fact. You look at the facts and they are what they are. So just be prepared.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, we just have to be prepared to offer other people grace,
Right.
right? Because we all deserve it.
Yes.
Everyone deserves it. Sometimes the thing is going to change. And it's just people in the past were just as imperfect as we are today. They made decisions that were the best they could at the time with the info they had and the emotional sort of well that they could pull from.
Mhm.
They did their best.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, if you're just tuning in, this is Breaking Bread, our very first live broadcast at Jacob's Restaurant. We're here at 7152 Ogontz Avenue in the West Oak Lane section of Philadelphia. Please come over. We're having brunch. It's a brunch buffet. You can pay for your buffet when you come in. Have a seat. We're going to get into some dancing in a little bit. DJ G Flow will be providing the music this afternoon. So come on through. We'd love to see you. I am here with members of the African American Genealogy Group. That is the focus of our brunch conversation today. And we have a lovely fruit tray, which we're going to get into right now, like some grapes and cherries and pineapple and strawberries and yellow watermelon, which you don't get to see often, which I love. All right. Let's just talk before we get deep into some of the things that you found in your search of your family. Talk about the interesting connection and the need to have like that food family history, the food that has been passed down in your family and special recipes, whether you know the recipe or not. Just say, it was my Aunt Grace's pot of chitlins was just, whatever, and no one's ever been able to make it like her, and I wish I had the recipe. Talk about some of those recipes in your family that were passed down that have become great traditions for you. And I'll start with you, Miss Regina.
Well, I was hoping you would go to Adrian
That's all right.
because my grandmother was an excellent cook. But so when I
Okay.
go in the kitchen to learn and this together, I never learned anything.
Oh,
But she was known for apple pie and pound cake,
Ooh.
and she was one of the original people. And she was not of the Islamic faith, and she would not eat chitlins because she was said that was the white man's garbage. So, that was our tradition. And but your point on the food, when Adrian mentioned that she was not raised with extended family, that's what my generation had. That we had the aunts; they all migrated to Philadelphia in 1917, so we were raised with the aunts and uncles. My generation, we're all over the country now, and our children are all over the country now.
Yeah.
So, but my daughter in particular makes an effort during the holidays to have a big meal and gather the grandparents at her
Yes.
home.
Yes, I love it. Thank you. Dean, how about you?
So I'm not really into food. I can't cook my way out of a closet. But the one thing I thought about your question before, that I remember my grandmother on my mother's side made excellent vegetable soup. I just loved it. It had meat in it along with good vegetables. And she passed away at 101 or something.
Ooh.
Wow.
And I remember, and she was very thin. She was really active all the time. I said to my mother, boy, I really miss her soup. So she said, let me try to make it. So it wasn't actually a recipe handed down to her, but she did from memory. And I said, no, it's missing a little bit of this. And she got it. She nailed it. So I would say that her vegetable soup, my grandmother's vegetable soup, she was from Eastern Shore, Maryland. I guess she brought it from there.
Wow. Okay. Which town? Which city?
Denton, Maryland,
Okay. Okay. My folks are from
Caroline County.
I can't remember it now because I'm thinking about it, but I'll come back.
Okay.
Yes, but they're from the area.
Okay.
Yes.
Cousins.
Probably. Yes, Miss Adrian.
The first thing that comes to my mind is actually not something that I got to eat a lot of, but that my mom got to eat a lot of. So my mom's biological mother passed away when my mom was a kid, but my mom still was able to keep in touch with extended members of her biological mom's family, including her Aunt Lila. And so I got to know Aunt Lila as well, and she would make cornbread. And so my mother loved her Aunt Lila's cornbread, and she would always ask Aunt Lila to give her the recipe. And Aunt Lila refused because she said, your hand is not the same size as my hand, so the measurements will not work. So my mother is
Wow.
still trying to recreate that cornbread because she never got the recipe.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. But I mean, I love how much how memories are wrapped up in sensory experiences.
Yes.
And food is just a thing that will pull it out. Like when I was in high school, I actually used that to put together my first genealogy project. For my senior project, I
Word.
traveled to visit family in Ohio and in DC and interviewed family members and asked them to tell me, what is a recipe that means a lot to you? And what are the stories that are connected to it? And who are the people who are connected to it?
Yes.
And then, like a nerdy dork, just as I am,
Stop
I called that book Family Preserves.
Yes. I love the name. I love it. And I love that whole the concept of really putting that together. I wish I had. So I also was sitting at the feet of my great aunt. So my great aunt, we called her Annie, but her name is Sarah. She was born in 1894. So to say that I sat at the feet of someone who was born in the 1800s and has very clear memories of Philadelphia in 1900 and beyond, until she passed in 1981, and she made everything from scratch, and I would watch her. I was too young to remember it all, but I would watch her, and it was like, you know, one of those old movies when she made an apple pie. She would sit it on the windowsill and let it cool, you know. And we were in North Philly, and we had like a dirt yard for a while. Then they got it paved, but she had old tires that my uncle built up so that she had a garden in these tires in the back. So we had like tomatoes and different root vegetables and whatever else she could put in those tires. And so we had a lot of fresh things in the hood, but from our own garden in the back. And I miss that. When she passed, all of that went away. Mom didn't keep that up. And, you know, the 80s were the 80s, and we just, you know.
When you cook now, though, do you feel like she's with you in the kitchen?
Sometimes, because I am attempting to recreate things based on how I remember them tasting. Now, we're talking about a long time ago, and I was a kid. So I'm like, I can't exactly remember how this tasted, but my auntie used to make corn fritters, oyster fritters, and they were like the best thing ever. So lately I've been trying to recreate the corn and oyster fritters based on kind of what she did, but since I don't eat dairy anymore, it's gonna be a little off because I'm using almond milk instead of cow's milk. But
and you know,
just
the
that
hardest part, I think, is also that part of that taste in our minds is just like the seasoning of memory.
Yes.
And, like, you can't recapture that.
Yes. And it was also the idea of feeling close to her because she's been gone for such a long time, and just everyone talking so fondly about her food. Like, I didn't want to be that part of the family that made the food tradition fall off, you know. Like, I couldn't fry chicken to save my life for the longest time. It would be beautiful on the outside and red in the middle. So I had to work on that during the pandemic, so I didn't disrespect the family name on some fried chicken. But before I let you all go, you have some awesome show and tell, some things that you have learned. Do you want to share some of that with us right now, Dean or Miss Regina?
Okay. This is my mother, Othello Vaughn. And before she passed, she was named by the, when I went to Cameroon, we met the African kings called Vaughn. So Habiba.
Yes.
And this is my great grandmother and her husband. There's always genealogy work to do, so we don't know about him after 1920. But the family, she was the matriarch of the family, and they came to Philadelphia in 1917.
1917. Wow.
Yeah, yes, and then I have brought the census record of the family here in Philadelphia in 1920. And they're all living together in a 3-story house in North Philadelphia on Bevere Street.
Wow.
So I bought that as well.
I love it.
And Mom's book, Sankofa.
Yes.
What's the subtitle? You didn't read the subtitle, but it says 1826 to 1986.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
See, Mom was fortunate our family was on the census records. And what happened when she went to South Carolina in the 80s, the black genealogists were just learning this. So she hired the white genealogist. So she was able to get these records, the sale records of her family.
Wow.
And so these records are from the 80s when the white genealogist helped her pull it, because we were enslaved. And then when he died, we were not free. We went to the second one. We weren't free until after the Civil War.
Wow. And it's amazing how if you do sign up for some of the paid sites, you have access to these records without having to go, you know, somewhere and sit in a room to look through them. I wish we had more time. I'll have to have you come back so we can talk about that process. But I know you have some certificates.
So in
Dean, that you
addition,
wanted
I
to
mentioned
show.
my second and third great grandmother. Third was enslaved. I mentioned I traced her father, and I recommend everyone to look at some of these lineage organizations to document your family. So certificates. This is an organization called the Sons and Daughters of the U.S. Middle Passage, and you have to prove through documentation that your ancestors were enslaved in the United States. So
Wow.
Bennett Williams, my fourth great grandfather, I got documented. So anybody that comes after me, they can go see how I traced him. The last one I'll show you is James Dew. On my mother's side of the family, he actually fought in the Revolutionary War. Adrian is director at the Museum of the American Revolution,
Yes,
so she
she
knows
is.
this story very well. But there were over 5,000 blacks, I forget what the number is, they're estimating now more than that, that actually fought for the winning side in the American Revolution. And my fourth great grandfather was one of those. So this also documents him. And there is one other certificate I'll say really quickly. Another organization called the Society of First African Families of English America. They've also recognized on my wife's side of the family, Jacob Thatcher. That's her sixth great grandfather, brought into the country in 1749 at 11 years old, enslaved, along with another girl that was 10 years old. 3 years later, they were made to married and have a whole bunch of kids for this rich lawyer in Connecticut, and she descends from them. So Society of First African Families of English America is another document.
Fantastic. And for people to really start this journey, if they're inspired from today's conversation, where can they go again to find out about the African American Genealogy
They
Group?
need to hang out with us. They need to go to
I know that's right.
www.aagg.org.
Yes, one more time.
aagg.org.
And we're also on Facebook too.
Yes. Join the Facebook group. That might be a little quicker. You can do that today and then go to their website to find out more. I want to say thank you all so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome
Yes.
sauce. So we're going to shift gears. We want to speak with the owner of Jacobs, and we're going to let our genealogy guests step to the side. Just a reminder, we are broadcasting live from Jacobs Restaurant here in the West Oak Lane section of Philadelphia. This is our first live version of Breaking Bread, not attached to another event. We were live at Odunde, but that was a special thing. But this is our first live brunch and groove event. So that means after the conversation, after the talking, we're going to get our 2 steps on up in here. And 2-stepping continues until 3:00 this afternoon. You can come in, you can have brunch, make sure you pay for the brunch, have the brunch, and then 2-step with us here in the main room. Jacobs is located at 7152 Ogontz Avenue. And we want to encourage folks to support Jacobs all throughout the week. They have brunch, they have special events, they have all types of things. And we're going to find out from Tanisha, who's going to sit right here next to me, and we're going to chat more about Jacobs and her journey as a restaurateur here on Breaking Bread. So I want you to put that on so we can hear from you. Hello, Miss Tanisha Trippett, owner of Jacobs Restaurant. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm breathing on schedule. Glad to be here. Thank you for hosting us today.
You're welcome. It was our pleasure.
Awesome. So tell us about your journey, because Jacobs, the restaurant, is new, but you're not new to this. Tell us about your journey as a chef, ma'am.
Yes. So my journey as a chef, I started off doing finance, and I wanted to do something that I really love to do. I always hosted dinner, barbecues at my house, and I would invite people from my job to the house.
Okay.
So when I turned 35, I was like, you know what? I want to do something else. I didn't want to continue to be a bill collector, because that's what I was.
Got you.
And I went to school when I was 35. I graduated with my culinary degree at 39. No, I was 39. And then I started working at Wells Fargo, because I felt like before I started my business, I really wanted to know what it was like from the bottom up without having to be a dishwasher.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
I took a job as a prep cook, and in 2017, my boss that I worked for those years, he pulled me to the side and said, Tanisha, I think it's time for you to go ahead and start your own business.
Nice.
And he gave, long story short, he gave me a check for $30,000. to start my own business.
Where these bosses?
So
Just giving up money. I'm talking about that. Start your own business.
Yeah, so he's
amazing.
I know you probably can't go to the bank and get a loan, so I'm going to start you off, and then I had to pay him back 5 years, and I paid him back 5 years to that date and I bought the food truck, and I started off as a food truck, and then
Tell us about the food truck.
So I bought the food truck 2017.
Mhm.
I used to be outside of the crime scene at 10th and it was 10th and Popular or 9th and Popular or something like that.
Okay.
So I did that for a little while. Then I did private parties. My pitch was, let me pull up to your party. You pay for the party. You pay for the food truck, and you can host your party. Your guests you can spend time with your guests while we take care of everything else.
I love it.
And people loved it. So we started doing that, food truck parties. So I started doing it for private people. I did it for businesses. I did it for schools. And it was great. And then I got a contract at Love Park.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we started getting a buzz then. And then 2019 came. So I said, instead of paying for a commissary kitchen, I was like, well, I'm going to just get a cafe. So that way, when the food truck is not operating, I can still sell food for brunch. So that's what I did. It was 7135 Germantown Avenue.
Okay.
And I called it Brotherly Grub Cafe.
Yes.
Then March of 2020, the whole entire world shut down.
Yes.
So I had to shut down the food truck and figure out a plan for the cafe. So I did something, a pay forward, so people could buy their brunch. Because at this point, all my money for the food truck was going away. And I said, people don't know who I am yet in the neighborhood. So what I did was I told people you can buy food and you can treat somebody else for $15.
Okay.
So people was buying 2 at a time. And then they started donating meals to hospitals, to maintenance people.
Yes.
And then we became big. The Eagles found out who we were. So we had a mention in Forbes magazine. And after that, then we were on FYI Philly. Then we was on CBS. And Apple did something. The gaming sports bets. They started finding out who we were. So our business started booming, and I had to get a bigger space.
Wow.
So then I moved to 7165. And after 7165, it was a whole issue with that. So the Lord blessed me with this on 7152 Ogontz Avenue. And just so happened I'm from 74th.
Yes.
And Ogontz Avenue. So I'm back home.
So you know the area.
Yes.
Yeah, you can give it up for that, y'all. You can give it up for that. Awesome. So we only have 2 minutes left in the broadcast. Tell people what they can expect, because we want them to come out for brunch. We're having a day party right after the broadcast. Yes. So we're going to shake a leg, but you can still eat the food. So give us the idea of the layout for brunch today.
Okay, so the layout for brunch, we're doing a buffet, but you can also order from the menu. We have mussels, we have corn on the cob, we have fruit, we have salad, we have omelet station, we have sausage, bacon, there's pork, it's also turkey, we have fried catfish, we have fried chicken, we have potatoes, grits. We have a whole spread.
All the good things you want for brunch
stuff.
on a Sunday.
On a Sunday. And every Friday we're doing video music bingo. It's something new.
Okay.
And we give out $50 total. So you get a $10 gift card if you win your they have 5 different sections that you can win. So you can win $10 each.
Yeah.
And if it's a tie, it's a dance off. So it's a lot of fun. And we're doing that on Fridays. And we're coming up with programming for the rest of the week. So Wednesdays we're trying to do like hip hop one Wednesday, Afro beats another Wednesday.
Okay.
And we have dinner Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday
And
nights.
Friday. I love it. Tanisha Tribbett, owner of Jacob's Restaurant. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming to Jacob's to launch your first broadcast, Breaking Bread.
Yes, we appreciate you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's all the time that we have for the broadcast. So I got to say thank you to a whole bunch of people because, listen, this is a group effort. Shout out to the whole Word team, especially to Miss Kawesa, who is in the building, our marketing and promotions director. Also, much love going out to Troy, our engineer, to Niall, who is our live streaming producer, to Nicholas back at the studio, and of course to my guests, Dean Henry, Adrian Wally, Regina Vaughn, and of course, Miss Tanisha Tribbett. Thank you all so much. If you're not in the building, you need to be. DJ G Flow is about to spin right now. Have a peaceful, positive, and productive day. David Barnes is next. Yes, ma'am. Well, that's